Once you get AIs that are massively smarter than we are, we're in a domain where we're not going to be able to predict what happens. That is scary, but it probably won't stop the singularity.
The development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race.
2029, we get AIs as smart as people. By 2045, we have AIs boundlessly more intelligent. Whatever happens with this superintelligence, its mind state will be conditioned by the earlier AIs. What is AI mostly being used for on the planet Earth right now?
Drones, tanks, and automated gun machines could allow war to be fought on a scale greater and faster than ever before.
Selling, spying, killing, and gambling are the primary goals and values in the mind of the first superintelligence. I mean, we're not setting the best example in terms of the way human society is being regulated right now, nor the way we treat non-human life forms on the planet. What if the AI treats us the way we treat less intelligent animals? We want them to be more compassionate to us than we are to each other. The attitude of wanting to foster connectivity of all sentient beings is quite important. If we can get that attitude into our super AIs, we're going to be a lot better off. I want people to start deeply thinking and to start learning and studying and to be figuring out how they can best contribute, just as I've done in my own life. May you live in interesting times. It'll be even more interesting.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... Are machines taking over the world? Well, the simple answer is yes, and it's only a matter of time before we're going to have some type of relationship with AI, with cyborgs, and with computers. And my guest today, Dr. Ben GOERTZEL, is here to tell us that it can be done in a good way. But that's only if we can get back control of AI into the hands of private citizens. They're going to be able to put human values and human consciousness into these AIs, because if we leave it in the hands of companies like Google and places like the military, it might evolve in a way that we will never, ever be able to control. And so I really love talking to Ben about this entire concept. I mean, people freak out when they hear about AI and the singularity, but most people think it's happening in 2045. And that means basically the machines are going to be able to develop everything in rapid time. They'll be able to create Nobel Peace Prize winning discoveries in 5 seconds. And it's only a matter of time before we're going to have to get used to these relationships that we're going to have with machines. And so I really appreciate Ben being on this show, and it freaked everybody out at London Real about what he was talking about, but the truth is, it is the future. So now is the time to be prepared and pay attention, because this is an incredible discussion about AI and the singularity with Dr. Ben GOERTZEL. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dr. Ben GOERTZEL, the founder and CEO of Singularity Net and Chief Science Advisor for Hanson Robotics. You are one of the world's leading experts in artificial general intelligence, and you have decades of expertise applying AI to practical problems like natural language processing, data mining, video gaming, robotics, national security, and bioinformatics. As Chief Science Officer for Hanson Robotics, you were part of the team developing the AI software for the humanoid Sophia robot, which can communicate with humans and display more than 50 facial expressions. Today, you also serve as chairman of the AGI Society, the Decentralized AI Alliance, and the futurist nonprofit Humanity Plus. Ben, welcome to London Real.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, first of all, how is London treating you, and how does it compare to Hong Kong, where you normally spend your time?
London's been great. I always have a good time here, and I think, for AI and advanced technology, certainly London has a very long and deep traditions with all the universities and that have been doing advanced research for a long time. So it's a very, between London, Cambridge, Oxford, there's a lot of depth in the AI field, which is really quite interesting. Hong Kong, it's a little different. It's the gateway to China, and China doesn't have so much history in AI, but they're pursuing and funding it with energy like you've never seen before, right? So the amazing dynamism in Asia now. You go away for 2 months and revolutions have happened. I don't quite get that feeling here, but there is a great depth of thinking and experience in AI and associated pursuits here.
Right, and a company, DeepMind, that was bought by Google, was based here, right? And probably a lot of Cambridge and Oxford talent in that company, I guess.
DeepMind was based here, and actually one of the founders of DeepMind, Shane Legg, worked for me from '98 to 2001, like well before he came here he was at Kiwis from New Zealand, not British. So, yeah, I mean, DeepMind has been London's, I guess, biggest success in AI software realm, and they are basically a research division of Google rather than a sort of practical application engine like you have in many of Google's Mountain View teams. And I think DeepMind has recruited people from all over the planet. I mean, certainly not a preponderance of British people, but then, I mean, in the decades I've been visiting London, it's become more and more international. It looks really different than like 35 years ago when I was here the first time. So, but DeepMind is doing fantastic stuff. I think they're one of the few major projects to take general intelligence seriously and to really be pursuing thinking machines that can think, like people can, or even more imaginatively and creatively and broadly than people. It's a bit unfortunate to me all this great talent is sort of sucked into the proprietary firewalled domain of big companies. I'm more an advocate of an open and decentralized mode of development of both applied AI and artificial general intelligence, which is what we're doing with our Singularity net blockchain-based AI platform and with OpenCog and open source general intelligence project. But the quality of work in DeepMind is very, very impressive, obviously.
Yeah. It probably crosses over to what you do a little bit more than some other just pure tech plays, but yeah.
It does, although, Facebook has Facebook AI Research Lab. They've got an amazing team in Paris working toward AGI. Baidu and Tencent in China are doing a lot of interesting things. So I think DeepMind is awesome. Their lead over other corporate AI teams is perhaps not as great as the media would lead you to believe. Like they've done a really good job of PR as well as a good job of research. And
they did the Go stuff with the game Go and a few other things.
Which is sort of not necessarily material to Google's business, nor to their R&D on general intelligence, but it's been amazing in terms of bringing them into the public eye, and it's great stuff. Like my oldest son he's doing his AI PhD, but he's also an experienced Go player. And I remember a few years before AlphaGo, we were looking at the research literature on AI and game playing, and we're like, someone's going to beat Go. Like the techniques are there now. There's techniques in academic publications. Computers are faster. We even thought of focusing on it, but then, it's a big project. It takes 12 people, like a few years, and we don't have the spare change for that. Now, I'm sure the guys in DeepMind are looking at the exact same academic research papers my son and I were and thinking the exact same thing, but then they have Google's resources, so they could pull the trigger on it. But that's cool. There's a lot of companies with a lot of resources, and most of them they're not identifying amazing things like that to do, right? So,
Yeah, so that's a plus. Well, look, I'd love to get into like a lot of your work today and where you think we're going with AI, things we need to look out for. I was just thinking today, right before I sat down with you, that in 1989, I started as a freshman at MIT, and I remember
that's the year I got my PhD. Actually.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
I remember there was this thing called Project Athena there, which was the very first like email, and they gave us an email, and the only person I could email was my brother at Stanford because
You could have emailed me.
I could email you.
I got emailed that same year.
Really?
The last year of my PhD at Temple University in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And yeah, that my last 6 months as a PhD student or something.
Got your email.
We got email addresses, and yeah, there weren't a heck of a lot of people to email. Then a year later, it was really useful, right?
Yeah.
It spread like wildfire.
Yeah, it was really clunky back then. But also, I don't remember anyone talking about AI at MIT back then. You know, the internet
Marvin
didn't exist.
Minsky was there before that.
I'm sure he was, but I'm saying it wasn't part of the general conversation. You know, like I said,
Yeah.
the internet didn't really exist yet, so it was still kind of a bit of more of an old school tech. Sure, there was computer science and double E, and I was in mechanical engineering.
AI was obscure. Yeah, I mean, I got interested in AI due to science fiction in the early 1970s, but then when I looked at, as a kid, when I looked at what was really being done in the AI field, it was pretty boring, right? It didn't compare to the science fictional visions, but it kind of grew gradually. You remember Douglas Hofstadter's book, Gödel, Escher, Bach, in the late 70s, that sort of layout AI and what we would now call general intelligence, and it went through, you know, consciousness, cognition, abstraction, all the key ideas talked about in AI now. So that, I mean, and he was professor at University of Indiana, Bloomington. So I think it was sort of a slow burn in hindsight, but there was profound work on AI going on in U.S., U.K., Germany, Russia, Japan, you know, since 1950s, and in some ways back to the 1930s, and it was sort of going on in the background. And you know, if you talked about general intelligence or building machines that could think like people or building Mr. Data from Star Trek, you would get laughed out of the seminar room in a university. So that the AI work that was going on was real and it was making advances, but it was not ambitious compared to the broader scope of AI that you'd see from science fiction or Hollywood movies. Now, in the last 5 years, things have changed dramatically, right? I mean, narrow AI that can do highly specific things for certain applications. Narrow AI is everywhere and it's key to every major company or government strategy. And AGI, artificial general intelligence, while not yet fully realized, it's taken seriously, right? You can give a seminar on it. You can even talk to a CEO about it, and they'll be thinking about like how will they adapt their business model as narrow AI gives way to AGI, right? So it's amazing the transformation that we've seen in the last 5 years regarding AI, and I think it's mostly just a few practical applications that have caught the public eye, and then that triggered a sea change in sentiment.
And those practical applications, is it like the robotic stuff?
Face recognition.
Face recognition.
A lot, right? Because then, I mean, not only can governments use it to surveil all their citizens, but I mean, you go on Facebook, you see, you know, everyone's picture is automatically labeled. Everyone can see that. It's there all the time, right? And I mean, autonomous driving, it's amazing. 10 years ago when I told people, you know, pretty soon all cars will be automated, everyone thought I was nuts, right? And then 2015, DARPA driving Grand Challenge, you saw cars and trucks driving themselves through the desert. Then the Urban Grand Challenge a couple years later, like all of a sudden, it became obvious. Everyone's like, well, yeah, of course, automated driving will happen. It's just a matter of time. So a few things like that, face recognition, automated driving, then AlphaGo, Jeopardy, these things, everyone can observe the AI doing things they thought only humans would be able to do. And this seemed to have triggered a sort of global change of mind where people are now over the threshold and they've realized, well, if AI can recognize faces, drive cars, and play Go, what is the limit actually going to be, right? Which was obvious to me from like, I don't know, 1973 when I was 5 or 6 years old, right? But I guess if you don't have the right cast of mind. You need to see very palpable examples to understand what's going on.
Yeah, so this is exciting times right now. Or what's the famous Chinese proverb? May you live in interesting times.
May you live in interesting times.
And this is it right now.
My whole life has been interesting times in one way after another.
Right,
so,
but the next 10 years will be the most interesting time of your work, probably.
It'll be even more interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, even after that will be even more interesting because we'll get brain plugins and we'll fuse our minds with the super AI and get a trillion times human intelligence.
All right, well, I want to talk about that and 3D printing our babies, which we were talking about earlier. And I want to talk about some terms just so people get up to
You want to buy some 3D printed babies?
I mean, are you selling them?
How many do you want?
All right, we'll talk about this. And I want to talk about Singularity, blockchain, all this other good stuff. First off, a lot of people know like some big heads in Silicon Valley that have their AI thoughts and they throw them out there. So, I mean, I could be wrong here, but I think you got kind of the Elon Musk school that says like the AI is really dangerous and we have to look out for it. And maybe you got the Peter Thiel school that says, no, it's going to be okay and they're going to be our friends. And, you know, of course, two of these guys run massive companies with massive amounts of money behind them. What are some of the scenarios that we've heard and what's right and what's wrong in your opinion, just to start off in a general way for people that maybe haven't thought about this as much as you have?
I would say what people think about super intelligence, AI that's a billion or trillion times smarter than human beings, says more about the people doing the speculating than about the reality of what's going to happen. Because we're talking there about a future that we truly cannot predict in detail. There's an irreducible uncertainty, just in the same sense that a cockroach will have a hard time predicting who's going to win World War II. Like, I mean, once you get AIs that are massively smarter than we are, on a rational basis, we're in a domain where we're not going to be able to predict what happens. And what I see is, in Asia, where I've lived for 8 years, the predominant feeling and assumption is that AIs will be friends of humans and will help humans and everything will come out well. Whereas in the US, the prevailing vibe has often been more paranoid, like, oh, the AIs are going to kill everyone, they're going to be the Terminator, they're going to take all our jobs and we'll be left rummaging in the garbage or something. And I don't think this has to do with differing, like, rational extrapolations of technology to the future. It's just different emotional mindsets, because when you're dealing with the radical unknown, the most convenient thing is just to bring to it whatever your emotional biases, whether it's cooperative as in Asia, or paranoid and adversarial as in much of the US, right? And there's an irreducible uncertainty there. You can find that exciting, you can find it frightening, you can find it both. It's still going to be irreducibly uncertain. And I mean, Nick Bostrom here in the UK at Oxford, he's been very vocal that superintelligence is potentially dangerous. And it is, but the thing is, Nick, who I've known a long time, I have a lot of respect for him, but he has a way to make it sound like superintelligence is probably going to kill everybody. But I mean, we don't know that. If you read his book, Superintelligence, all he really argues for is that that's possible. Like, we can't rule out the possibility that the superintelligence will just turn us all into extra hard drive space or something, right? And you can't rule it out. So there's a certain irreducible uncertainty. We could decide, okay, well, let's just stop developing all this advanced tech until we somehow come up with a theory that will let us reduce this uncertainty. I personally am guessing that will never happen. Like, you could, even if we pause development of advanced technology for 10,000 years, I don't think something with an IQ of 200 is going to be able to predict what happens when you create something with an IQ of 200,000. I think that there's an information theory problem there. But the other thing is, if the US and UK decided to pause development of AI technology, China certainly isn't going to, right? If China did, Vladimir Putin certainly isn't going to. He's on record saying whoever solves AI first will be the most powerful in the world.
Do you agree?
Yeah. And I think...
And this is happening, whether it's 10
happening
years
now.
or 50 years.
That's the thing. So then the thing that we really should be worrying about, not so much the irreducibly uncertain phase when there are super AIs. I mean, we can think about that and how to bias things in a positive direction. But what happens in the transition period? Like, let's suppose my good friend Ray Kurzweil is correct that 2029 we get AIs as smart as people. By 2045 we have AIs boundlessly more intelligent than people. Suppose that vague timeline is sort of correct, right? What happens in the interim, right? Like, how does that affect industry? How does it affect our economy? How does that affect our lives? Because my best guess is whatever happens with the superintelligence, its mind state will be conditioned by the earlier AIs that we've created that grow into that superintelligence.
Does everyone share that opinion?
No. Some people think that superintelligence is just a whole other different thing, right?
Because like part of me thinks that 10,000 years from now, the superintelligence will just do whatever it wants to do, even if Ben...
Well, it may 10,000 years from now, but the worry is more the transition, right? So imagine like the transition from hunter-gatherer to agriculture, or the transition from not having language to having language, right? Now, of course, the first people to invent language, those cavemen could not foresee differential calculus, Shakespeare, and the internet, right? And programming languages, whatever, right? Of course, they couldn't foresee those further developments. What they could maybe do is smooth the transition for their children and grandchildren, right? And so that's really what we're talking about here. Of course, a superintelligence will go in directions we can't comprehend and we can't foresee. For that matter, it may contact alien life that's like humming all around us, embedded in the vibrations of subatomic particles that we're too stupid to detect. You have no idea what's going to happen.
Right.
On the other hand, that doesn't mean it's irrelevant to think about, like, okay, I mean, I have 4 children and 1 granddaughter. I don't want them to die or be reprocessed into like fuel for the superintelligence or something. I want them to be able to grow up and flourish and take advantage of new technologies that AIs help people develop, right? So it's still meaningful to think about how to smooth out the transition to the radical unknown.
Okay.
And I think it's a plausible hypothesis that the initial value system of a superintelligence may be conditioned by the value systems of the earlier stage AIs that we create. And then toward that end, we can think about what is AI mostly being used for on the planet Earth right now. I mean, it's selling, spying, killing, and gambling, basically, right? That advertising, surveillance, military, and then stock market trading and so on. So if selling, spying, killing, and gambling are the primary goals and values in the mind of the first superintelligence, I mean, is it very likely we're going to have, a benevolent transition period? Or should we be, as well as working on general intelligence research, which I've been doing for decades, should we be working on making sure that early stage general intelligences are doing things like, education, childcare, elder care, scientific research, mental health counseling, decision support for governments. Like, we want the early stage general intelligences to be doing benevolent things in cooperation with a broad swath of humanity, so that the mind state of the first superintelligence is positive and benevolent, rather than the first superintelligence being preoccupied with spying on people and selling them crap they don't need.
Right. And you say mind state because these in artificial intelligence, they will have some type of, I hate to say the word, consciousness.
I believe so.
All right.
I mean, there's philosophy there that's not resolved. On the other hand, there's philosophy that's not resolved in our everyday life. Like, I can't prove that you, according to science, rather, as opposed to some philosophy or spirituality anyway, I can't scientifically establish that you are conscious.
Correct.
And not just some meat machine put here to entertain and annoy me, right? I mean, that's, so,
yeah.
But yet we go about our everyday life and we make laws about who it's legal to kill and who it isn't legal to kill. And I think it'll be the same way with AIs initially. Like, we don't have a well-grounded philosophy of consciousness, but we just have to we have to keep operating anyway,
Right.
which we do in our everyday lives. And my personal belief is that AIs are going to be conscious in roughly the same sense that people are. But I do think that as AI and brain-computer interfacing and quantum computing, as other technologies advance, we're going to gradually work toward a real science of consciousness, which will be quite interesting. I mean, I think we're going to find that any AI that has human-level intelligence is going to have some species of advanced reflective consciousness, but I mean, I'm open to other possibilities. Maybe we'll discover only quantum computers can be conscious,
Right.
and digital computers can't. I doubt it, but if that's where future science leads us, then so be it.
Do you foresee like the machines, I'm talking like a Terminator movie, the computers having like an evolution maybe like humans did, where they have like the Dark Ages and the Renaissance and the cultural revolutions as they go through their own evolutions of consciousness?
I think human evolution and human cultural evolution have had many very different characteristics, and you'll see with AIs, because humans are distinct individuals with our brains trapped in our heads and communication only by language, which is very low bandwidth, whereas AIs can swap brain matter whenever they want to. They can join into Borg minds and then subdivide whenever they want to. So it's going to be more like one big AI mind network, rather than a bunch of AIs in competition. It may start as a bunch of AIs in competition because the human world works that way. But as the AIs get more and more power, I'm suspecting they're going to sort of grow beyond.
Just bypass us.
They're going to bypass that way of doing things, because in the end you can have more intelligence and more understanding, and you can create more stuff by joining minds together than by being opposed. And humans feel that way too, is the thing. Like right now, what's the main thing we use computer technology for is to be constantly SMSing each other and video chatting back and forth and live blogging every time we fart, right? I mean, so once you have a brain implant that lets you thought SMS other people, like every 12-year-old school child will be thought SMSing each other all day while they sit in school. Like human beings also take every opportunity to join together with other humans into a sort of greater group intelligence. We just can't do it as efficiently as AIs will be able to.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean there won't be ups and downs, but it's different. A, because AIs can join into group minds flexibly as they want. B, the AI can save its state of mind and reboot, right? Like if human culture actually has lost information, they've burned libraries, right? And even we, as we get older, we may lose some understanding or ability we had before. If you're an AI, just save it all in the hard drive. You can reload it whenever you want, right? So or you can make copies of yourself and let each of the copies evolve in different directions, right? And then some of them may blend in with other ones. So I think we can't too closely take the history of humanity as a collection of largely distinct individuals communicating by language. We don't want to take that as the model for how AIs are going to grow. I mean, in a very broad sense, the principles of evolution hold, but when you don't have individuals that are separate and then get old and die and can't back up, I mean, you're going to have a very interestingly different kind of situation. You know, it's going to seem insane to us 30, 40 years from now that we lived all this time without the ability to make backup copies.
Right. Well, so tell me,
or to fork yourself, like, hey, what would it be like if I, sat in the mountain and meditated for 10 years? Right now, you have to give up your life to do that. What if you could make a copy of yourself and let it do that? Right?
And then check in on it later.
Yeah.
So let's talk 40 years from now or 50 years from now. What could that look like? You're talking about brain implants. You're talking about me digitally printing some kids, or you selling me some kids. But like, what's something that we should just accept now that could be a reality?
I think once we have a technological singularity, meaning AIs are much smarter than people.
Okay. Can we define that singularity? What is that?
Singularity is defined as a point when the rate of technology advance is so fast that from a human point of view, it appears infinite. Like say that the AIs in the global brain network are making new Nobel Prize level discoveries every 5 seconds, right? And what's going to come along with that is, molecular nanotechnology, where you can just build anything out of molecules the way we would now out of Legos or in a machine shop, and the ability to cure human disease and prevent death by just sending little bio-nano probes into the body to fix things, and 3D printing that solves material scarcity on the level of everyday human needs. So I mean having all these technologies coordinated together is going to be a fundamentally different regime of life than we have now.
That's mind-boggling. I mean, to me, to think
that's
about.
That's just the beginning.
And that happens every 5 seconds.
The thing is, this is the focus on the external machinery. But if you think about your state of consciousness, imagine that you had, access to reprogram anything in your mind whenever you wanted to. So you're like, well, I wish I didn't feel like eating so much junk. Okay, let's load the patch. Don't want to eat junk. Ding. You're done, right? Well, I wish I wasn't attracted to this type of girl. Okay, ding, I'm attracted to that kind instead. Like, I'd like to be able to, focus fully for the next 5 months on this. Okay, let's load the focus patch. You can do that, right? So the ability to rewire your brain at will, mental illness of the kinds we're familiar with now are gone. Unhealthy relationships are gone unless they're specifically what turns you on, right? So
that's assuming the machines let us survive. Then we have these options.
Well, yeah. So what I think is going to happen is we'll each have 2 options. So option A, you fuse your brain into the super intelligent mind matrix, then you become part of something billions, trillions, quadrillion times more intelligent than you were. On the other hand, probably you lose your illusions of individual self and free will and your nostalgic attachment to your human memories. And
your body, you lose your body as well.
You lose the requirement to have your body. You could have your body, but if you can see through a billion bodies at one time, this one body becomes arbitrary, right? I think that's one interesting option, and there's a question of how fast you want to fuse with this supermind. If it happens in 1 second, or do you want to phase it gradually over a year or something, right?
Hopefully that's your choice.
Who knows?
And then why have new humans if we've already got all these?
Well, that's one option. So now, option B is remain in a form very similar to the human form we have now. Get rid of death and disease. Get rid of mental illness. No need for scarcity, because instead of just a dishwasher in your house, you have a 3D printer that will print you any physical object you want, be it food or a new bicycle, whatever it is, and you live in a human life of joy and abundance.
I don't know if the joy is there, but we'll have the abundance.
Well, the joy
everybody will get more depressed.
The joy will be there, because if you don't feel joyful enough, you will just load joy patch number 3.7 into your brain.
Ben, even that sounds a little ridiculous.
You will feel that's not ridiculous
at all. Isn't that synthetic joy? Isn't the human experience all about overcoming difficulties and dealing with a
my second son Zebulon had a quote which was, "Pain builds character, bad character." So I would say humanity has a lot more scope than what we normally understand. The states of
caveman mentality, you think, where?
Well, it's just particular, right? The states of consciousness we enter into, they're different than the ones that people in Stone Age societies had. Very, very different. And they're different than the ones a monk meditating in a Buddhist temple has. And, they're very different than the mentality people will have in the future era of, human abundance I'm envisioning. I think the brain is capable of a lot of states of consciousness beyond what we enter into on an everyday basis. Like if you could experience what the average guy in the UK in 1350 was experiencing day to day, it's going to be very, very different than the way.
Okay, but without the social media, he's still got to eat. He's got kids. The sun comes out. It won't be that different, will it?
Well, it depends on how you're looking at it. When you're looking at it like joy comes from struggling and overcoming struggles, I mean, they may not think that way at that point. I don't think that's a necessary part of human physiology, because like I talk to people who say, well, death is what gives life meaning.
You don't believe that?
I mean, you can derive meaning from anything. Human mind is wonderfully flexible, but I think if we don't have to die, suddenly we'll find other ways to derive meaning that don't involve dying, right? There's a lot of ways to derive meaning, right? Other than through death or through suffering and then feeling the suffering go away. Now, it might be that there's some certain minimum level of pain and discomfort that's just intrinsic to the human experience. My feeling is we habitually experience much more than that minimum level right now, because where do you stop? Like you go to the Middle Ages. I mean, it's not that like half your kids would die as babies, right? I mean, very high percentage of women dying in childbirth back then, right? And mostly your teeth would rot by age 40. You'd have a toothache in your mouth all the time because there was no dentistry, right? And so you could look at the way people lived in the Middle Ages and say, well, suffering is intrinsic to life. It's just natural that half your kids die as babies, half the time your wife dies of childbirth, and you have a toothache all the time because all your teeth are rotten. But now we look at it and we're like, no, that's totally unnecessary, right? So I think a lot of the suffering that we take for granted as part of life now will seem totally unnecessary. The thing is, humans in that era, they'll be human because they choose to be human, because otherwise they could fuse with the superhuman AI mind matrix. They choose to be human for their own aesthetic reasons, essentially, and why not? I mean, I don't think every dog or bird should become a human just because we're in a way more generally intelligent than they are, right? I mean, every creature in the ecosystem has some beauty and integrity to it. Humans do also, right? It's not like we're morally bound to uplift ourselves to become superhuman AIs and give up our humanity. The thing is, the humans will be like the squirrels in the national park are now, right? They're carrying out, the squirrels in the national park are carrying out their lives, and we who take care of the national park don't intervene in their love affairs or their hunt for acorns either. On the other hand, there is a world outside that park which they can't understand, and if they run out of it, they may get run over by a truck.
And that's the metaphor for what AI and the Singularity brings to humans.
Well, either the squirrels can upload and join the people and become super intelligent, or they just remain the squirrels in the park.
Okay, hopefully I have that option. When do you think the Singularity is coming?
Ray Kurzweil says 2045. So I'll stick with that. He's
26 years.
Yeah. Could be sooner. Could be later. Could be 2030. Could be 2070. I don't think it's 2200. I don't think it's 2020.
It won't be 2030. It's too soon, right?
I don't know, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess when it starts to happen, it happens real fast.
Well, that's sort of the point, right? Like so suppose that as a thought experiment, like suppose in 2025, Google DeepMind or my own AI team in SingularityNet and OpenCog, like suppose by 2025, one of us manages to create an AI that is essentially as smart as a human being, right? So it can hold a conversation like a human being, and it can prove math theorems like a human mathematician. It can analyze a biology data set, right? So and
a bit like your robot, Sophia.
And you put it in a robot body. I mean, that's a separate problem. It could operate many robot bodies all at once, right? But unlike Sophia right now, it can really understand what it's seeing and what it's doing fully at the level of a human can. So suppose you get there, like how far are you from a true singularity? Because this AI can then copy itself. You can make 1 million of those, right?
Improve itself.
Yeah, right. Because you can, once the AI is as smart as a human, okay, let's teach it computer science. I mean, we can send it to school. It can learn math. It can learn programming. It can learn hardware engineering. And then you can copy 1 million of those, right? So all 1 million of those, maybe half of those are working on improving its own intelligence, but they're not working in isolation like humans are. They can share thoughts directly because they're all just running in the compute cloud, right? So it seems very plausible within a few years of getting to that human level AI, it's going to invent all manner of amazing new things. It doesn't mean it'll be instantaneous. I mean, doing lab research still takes time, building new hardware still takes time, but of course it can be working on how to speed that up, right? Like how to more fully automate manufacturing and laboratory research. So yeah.
And then it could take us out of the process as well, possibly.
It could. I mean, that depends on the value system that the AGI has, right? And I mean, this is why it's important to, give values of kindness, compassion, tolerance, inclusiveness, love for all sentient beings. We want to get these positive values into the AI as much as we can.
And we think we can program that into AI.
I think you teach it.
You teach it.
You program it with the ability to learn that.
But then won't it unlearn that if it doesn't suit it? Or that's what we don't know?
I mean, it's very subtle because human values are a moving target, right? Like the values of suburban New Jersey in 1975 when I was in elementary school are not the same as the values in suburban New Jersey in the US right now. Like, I mean, back then, gay marriage was illegal and violently opposed by almost everybody, right? And racism was very rampant there. So, I mean, human values they're evolving all the time. By the values of medieval Europe, you and I and probably almost everyone listening to us deserve to burn in hell forever, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't, if you gave the AI exact human values from 2019, then by 2050, it's going to be horrible. It'd be like having a dictator with the values of 1950 America or something, right?
Right.
So you want an AI that will have evolving values in a way that somehow respects the ongoing evolution of human values,
and that hopefully still respects it and doesn't just make its own.
Which is very subtle, right? So some of my friends who are vegans and animal rights activists are like, well, what if the AI treats us the way we treat less intelligent animals, right? And you think about like we care about extinction of species, though. I mean, not as much as we should, but in general, we don't want to extinct entire species of subhuman animals, but we don't care much about one cow, sheep, pig, or wolf more or less, right? We care about like the genome, right? So if you took that analogy, the AI, it would like to keep humans around, because I mean, we're the creators, we're the ancestors, we have our own unique aesthetic value. But by that analogy, it may not give a crap about one human more or less, any more than we care about one wolf or pig more or less, right? So
we didn't keep the Neanderthals around.
No, but we weren't as reflectively intelligent then as we are now. And I think that there is an argument that as human cultures advance more and more toward abundance and away from scarcity, there's more caring about the environment. There's more compassion toward non-human animals. I mean, there was a lot in Stone Age society, and it sort of went down in the Industrial Revolution, and now it's certainly going up again. But I guess the point is, we want our AIs not only to be super intelligent, we want them to be super compassionate. Like, we want them to be more compassionate to us than we are to each other, because we're killing each other. Humans are killing each other for no good reason all the time, right? So we want them to be morally better than us in some sense, right?
And we hope they are.
Yeah, we're not on the whole, we're not setting the best example in terms of the way human society is being regulated right now, nor the way we treat non-human life forms on the planet, nor the applications that we're deploying AI toward. Like, what are all the AI PhDs working on? What are all people's data being gathered together toward, right? I mean, it's, again, selling, spying, killing, and gambling. Right.
So this is one of the big things you talk about, in that all of the AI resources now are pretty much in the hands of companies and defense industries.
Quite a lot.
That have their own agenda for it, which is, what did you say? Killing,
selling, spying, killing, and gambling. Yeah. All the good stuff in life, right?
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.